Hi there, and thanks for joining me. Behind the wheel of my 2019 M2 competition, and I assure you the title was not clickbait. I tend to go over some of the things in this car that some of the other reviewers have failed to point out. Now, I don't have an English accent, and I won't be hooning the car like some people, but I'm going to provide you some insight you might find useful. First off, one of the things that people don't really point out is the difference in the steering over the prior model. They've greatly improved the electronic steering in the competition. And it wasn't the turn-in that people talk about. It wasn't the anything else or the feel of the steering. It is the return to center of the electronic steering which they greatly improved. As you see, when I released my hands, the thing really nicely comes back to center almost the way a hydraulic box would. That is just a huge difference in the prior car and makes a big difference on the highway. Another thing that's a little bit interesting, they reduced the thickness of the wheel. The wheel was actually thicker in the prior generation. The original car, I had a 2017. The wheel is actually thinner now, and I think BMW may have gotten the message that the wheels have gotten too fat. So I think this is closer to an ideal setup personally, and perhaps you'll find the same. What is also people have pointed out, of course, is you have the M1, M2 buttons. What is the real benefit of that? The real benefit of that is, besides saving your settings, the biggest thing is putting the car into one mode, which could be a casual automatic shifting mode. Without being on sport, the car almost goes into stealth mode. It's very quiet, it's an efficiency mode. Then you can push the next setting, have the car set in manual, in Sport Plus, and deliver all the sound you want. Another thing people might find different is that with the LCI improvement, they added the touchscreen display to the radio. Now, one of the things that people may not know is that you can use the memory buttons here to program all kinds of settings. I'm not such a fan of using the touchscreen display. Many of you probably are not either. But use the touchscreen display to save the sport setting. Instantly go to the sport setting. Now, how cool is that? That is a huge plus. And what many of you also may not have heard is that when they changed that part of the radio, they put in a bigger amplifier. So I've changed out all the speakers in this car with Focal drivers, and you hear the difference and improved power of the amplifier in the stereo. And it is a huge plus. One thing I can certainly recommend is getting rid of the Harman Kardon stock speakers, because they really don't do the job. Yet the existing radio amplification and infrastructure of the radio is certainly good. They have two 8-inch subwoofers under the seats, which actually is a pretty good setup to do a very good job for bass. You'll notice that I have the DCT transmission. In my 2017, it was actually manual. Everybody talked about the manual. How hot is the manual? We should all have a manual. Well, it is manual, and it is fun. The rev matching was good, but the shift knob was rubbery. The clutch was very light. It was okay, but it wasn't really fantastic. With the DCT, it really shifts instantly. It really works well. I really like the change. It certainly shifts instantly. Not sure how that really compares these days to the Porsche PDK or even a Ferrari F1 box, but it shifts quickly. The rev match is great. And of course on the track it would be a better way to go. How about the brakes? I think some people have talked about the brakes, and obviously the brake change was significant. But I haven't heard a lot of detail in the discussions. The coolest thing about this car is that it's got 6-piston and 4-piston fixed monoblock calipers front and rear with huge rotors. And these are Brembos. Brembos made for BMW. Finally updated with fixed piston Brembos. Now, the great part about it is that not only have they added those brakes, but the brake feel is better. BMWs often have a very sensitive brake pedals. You touch the brakes and they stop excessively quickly. Now they actually have a bit of a moderate feel, which is really an improvement. You can depress the pedal gradually and the brakes come on, and they come on hard. But they're not excessively grabby, which is great. So the brake feel is really nice. I think I can share some pictures. People haven't really focused on the size of the brakes and the calipers, but these front calipers barely fit in a 19-inch rim. The OEM rims, there's less than 1/4 of an inch of clearance between the front caliper and the wheels. So there's no way well, certainly not like a BMW wheel, but it's going to have to be a specially engineered wheel to get an 18-inch rim to fit under those front calipers. Anyway, the brake feel is great. Brakes look fantastic. And on this car I've put on 437 wheels, so I think you really get a better visual impact of the calipers on the car than with the stock competition wheels, which I find is kind of odd. I'm not sure. The competition rims just really don't show off the calipers, and because they're silver you can't see them either. I'm not sure why they put on such great brakes and didn't really show them off in the car. Yeah, the car really has terrific handling. It's amazing now, the improvements basically to the power of the car. Now the exhaust on acceleration, not terribly impressive, but the decel is not too bad. Certainly the DCT response is excellent. Of course, we know what season it is here. Driving around in the winter with some winter tires. Still, hopefully gives you an impression of what the car is like. It just really pulls hard from 4,000 RPM. It is terrific. Shifts are instant. One thing the car has really changed is the traction control. When you have the M mode on, MDM mode, The traction control really does not intervene. I've slid the car sideways without the traction control coming on. So, I think we've seen some of these cars wrapped around trees already. It doesn't surprise me because this car can get out of hand in a hurry, even in MDM mode, which is a bit surprising. I think in the non-MDM traction mode, actually the car has much more slip than the prior version. So BMW finally did quite a bit of work on the traction control in this car, which is a welcome improvement because traction control in the prior version intervened way too quickly. The traction control light came on anytime you put your foot down, basically. So this is a really welcome improvement. Anything else you want to know about the car, feel free to put it in the comments below, and I'll attempt to address them. Sport Plus, the car is a bit too responsive. Sport would be better, but what has also changed in the car is that when you put the car in Sport, you don't get the same exhaust note as you do in Sport Plus. In Sport Plus, you get way more burbles than in Sport, so I'm always leaving the car in Sport Plus. But the throttle response is a little too much, so it's hard to find a good medium between the two. I think the medium is going to be found in getting another exhaust for the car to bring up the volume, even when you're in Sport mode. For me right now, with the stock configuration, left leaving it in Sport Plus. One could always be convinced that there's more power in Sport Plus, but I'm sure there's no power difference between one and the other. You'll see my fuel light has already come on. That's another terrific feature about this car, which is like the M3, and I am being cynical. No range in this car. The fuel light has come on and I've put 147 miles on the tank. See how I drive, but this is the way the car should be driven. So I'm not coming anywhere close to 200 miles on a tank of gas. I don't know what your guys' experience is, but when you have a 12-gallon tank and you're getting 15 miles per gallon, you're just not getting a lot of range. I think it's really ridiculous, personally. I know the M3 was the same way. I found the prior car got better mileage. It was pulling 20 miles per gallon even with this kind of driving. But this car, bigger motor, more horsepower, less economy. And the economy doesn't really bother me. I think all of us concede that when you have a performance car, you really don't care so much about the economy. But I care about the economy as it pertains to the range. And I'm not getting any range. And that is really frustrating. I hate going to the fuel pump after the gas station after 150 miles on the car. I'd really love to see at least 200 miles, but we're not even getting that. So, I don't know, you can add your experiences. I know everybody makes claims that they're getting over 20 miles per gallon. I guess you drive very conservatively or you drive on the highway a lot. I mean, clearly the DCT has the 7th gear advantage, which is a huge plus. But if you're not driving on the highway, you might get like I do. You can see what it is right now. My tank, I was getting 15.5 miles per gallon, which is actually pretty good mileage for me. But I have had even less in the past, so the mileage is not terribly impressive. Well, we all know that the motor was changed. Obviously, there's more power. How does it feel? It really feels different. The other car had more torque on the lower end, This one probably has more torque, but the feel is a little bit different. The power really comes on at 4,000 RPM. And it really pushes you back in your seat. I didn't think the original car really pushed me back in my seat at all. I mean, sure, it felt good, power was adequate, but you didn't get that impact when you hit the gas. This car you do, and at going up from 4,000 to 5,000 RPM, the car certainly feels like it has a lot more. I haven't done the break-in service yet on my car, so I haven't even revved it past there, and it is anxious to rev past the 5,000 or 5,500 RPM limit. I'm anxious to get past the break-in and see how the car really performs. But that's really the feel. And people have complained a bit about the sound, and in Sport Plus, the response is good. The throttle response is really good. I think the problem with the sound, and now everybody's focused on the backfire on deceleration. Open the side window to hear it a little bit better, but focused on the decel sound versus the acceleration sound. So the car is really pretty quiet. And in efficiency mode, it is extremely quiet, and it's more quiet than the prior N55 exhaust was. But the throttle response is really good. And using the DCT, it shifts quickly. Thanks for joining me on this brief ride. I hope you've learned a couple of different things about the M2 competition, and hope to see you again soon.